It's a peculiar feeling to reach the age of 72 and find you've become invisible to your own children. They could see me physically, of course, during their dutiful monthly visits, but I had long ago stopped being a person in their eyes. I was now an inconvenient task, an item on a to-do list nestled between a trip to the dentist and paying the gas bill. My name is Arthur Blackwood, a widower, a retired civil engineer, and an apparent letdown to my progeny. My wife Eleanor passed from this world 5 years prior, leaving me in a quiet house in Chesapeake, alone with 3 children who seemed eager to discuss my declining years without their mother's moderating presence. The Friday began like any other. I was up at 6 o'clock sharp, a lifelong habit from my 40 years on construction sites that I couldn't shake. I made a potent cup of coffee, had some toast with peanut butter, and stepped outside for the mail. The box was crammed with the usual assortment of flyers, bills, and one envelope from Chesapeake Financial Bank, where I held my main savings account. The only thing odd was that statements arrived at the start of the month, and we were only halfway through. I opened the envelope inside, sinking into my favorite armchair. "Dear Mr. Blackwood," it began, "thank you for utilizing our line of credit." I read the first line again. A line of credit? I didn't believe in borrowing money and had always lived within my means. I was planning to purchase a new car to replace my aging Ford, but I intended to use cash I had saved over my long career. The letter detailed the activation of a credit line exceeding $500,000. $500,000, an amount that could buy a respectable home in our area. My hands trembled, not from age, but from a surge of anger and dread. A grave error had been made, or far worse, my identity had been stolen. I dialed the bank immediately. After an eternity of hold music and reassurances of my call's importance, an operator answered. "Mr. Blackwood," the young woman said after I laid out the situation, "our records show you came to our branch 2 weeks ago and personally signed all the required documents." "That's not possible," I retorted. 2 weeks ago, I was fishing with a friend in Norfolk. "I have people who can confirm that, sir. We have your signature on file and a copy of your identification. They must be forgeries," I insisted, my voice thick with indignation. "I want to speak with the manager." She begrudgingly agreed, and we set an appointment for the following day. I hung up, my heart pounding. Who would do such a thing? Steal my good name, secure a massive loan, and imagine I would never find out. An hour later, my phone rang. My daughter Clara's name flashed on the screen. The timing was too strange to ignore. "Daddy," she chirped, her voice uncharacteristically bright. "Vincent and I thought we'd come by for dinner tomorrow." "Nothing fancy, just want to see how you are." Clara and her husband Vincent typically visited on the last Sunday of each month, never deviating from their schedule. This unexpected visit only fueled my growing suspicion. "Of course, sweetheart," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'll be happy to have you." As I ended the call, I slumped into my chair. My daughter was a real estate agent, and her husband worked as a financial advisor. They lived a life beyond their means, constantly lamenting their inability to afford the house of their dreams. And now, a loan had been taken out in my name, followed by Clara's sudden desire for a visit. It was no coincidence. Clara had always been a challenging child, treating me with a subtle disdain and favoring her mother's company. After Eleanor died, she made no effort to hide her annoyance. Any advice I offered was an attempt to control her, any comment was a critique. "Dad, you're 72, she would often say when I shared my thoughts on her career. The world has changed. What was effective in the last century is irrelevant now." I learned to stay silent during her rants about the hardship of renting, the injustice that others could afford luxury homes while she and Vincent had to save. The reality was, they weren't saving at all. They drove new cars, wore designer clothes, and vacationed twice a year. Money flowed through their hands like water, yet they blamed everyone but themselves. Vincent was cut from the same cloth as my daughter, a tall man with immaculate hair and a practiced smile. He always spoke to me with a false reverence that barely concealed his impatience. He called me sir, but his eyes screamed, "When are you finally going to be gone?" One afternoon, I overheard them talking when they thought I was napping. "How much longer do you think he has?" Vincent whispered. I don't know, Clara answered. His own father lived to be 88. That's another 16 years, God, Vincent sighed. 16 years in this dump when we could have. They went silent when they saw me stir. This dump, as they called it, was the product of 3 decades of my own hard work. I had designed it myself and supervised its construction from the ground up. It was the home where my children grew up, where I had shared so many happy years with Eleanor. It may not have been a modern palace, but it was sturdy, spacious, and filled with memories. My other children, my sons Simon and Martin, weren't much better. They lived in different cities, their monthly calls feeling like a checked-off chore. They would ask about my health, talk about their own kids and careers, and then hastily end the call, claiming to be busy. To my grandchildren, I was a relic from a bygone era. My granddaughter Lily, Simon's daughter, once asked if it was true there was no internet when I was young and was astonished to learn I could use a smartphone. "Wow, Grandpa, you're really with it for your age," she'd remarked, using the same tone one might use to praise a dog for a trick. But I was not the feeble old man they perceived me to be. I still knew how to build a house from foundation to roof, could fix nearly any household problem, read contemporary books, and followed current events. But in their view, my age trumped all my skills and accomplishments. That night, sleep eluded me. The notion that my own daughter could have stolen my identity seemed both preposterous and terrifyingly plausible. How could she have faked my signature? How did the bank not question why a man who had never been in debt would suddenly borrow such a huge sum? The next morning, I went to the bank. The manager, Mr. Davies, greeted me with polite skepticism. He was a young man, around 35, with a well-groomed beard and an expensive suit. "Mr. Blackwood, I appreciate your concern, but the documentation is all in order," he stated, reviewing my file. "Here is your signature, and a copy of your ID." He showed me the folder. The signature was a convincing imitation of my own, but I knew I hadn't made it. Beside it was a copy of my driver's license. "It's a forgery," I said, my voice firm. "I did not sign these papers, nor did I authorize anyone to use my personal information." Mr. Davies sighed. "Sir, you were here on May 2nd, a Thursday. You were with a woman who said she was your daughter. You both spoke with our loan officer, Ms. Jennings, May 2nd. I was indeed in town that day. Clara had invited me to lunch, an unusual occurrence. She had been exceptionally attentive, asking about my life and even offering me a ride home. Now it all made sense. "May I speak with Ms. Jennings?" I asked. Certainly, Mr. Davies called her into the office. A young woman entered, looked at me, and nodded. "Yes, this is the client I worked with," she confirmed. "Mr. Blackwood and his daughter were here applying for a real estate loan. I have never seen you before in my life," I exclaimed. "There has to be a mistake," or I trailed off, hesitant to accuse a bank employee of conspiracy. Ms. Jennings looked genuinely taken aback. "Sir, we spoke for nearly an hour. You mentioned wanting to help your daughter purchase a house." I shook my head, feeling a rush of anger and powerlessness. "Look," I said, trying to remain calm. "I am a retired civil engineer. I have never borrowed a single cent. Why would I, at 72, suddenly decide to take on $500,000 in debt?" Mr. Davies and Ms. Jennings exchanged a look. "You said you wanted to assist your daughter with a home purchase," Ms. Jennings repeated. "Given your excellent credit and assets, the bank approved the request." "Someone impersonated me," I insisted. "My daughter must have found someone who resembles me." Or I stopped, knowing how unbelievable it sounded. "Mr. Blackwood," Mr. Davies said in a placating tone. "Perhaps you've simply forgotten the visit. At your age, at my age, I can still distinguish truth from falsehood." "Young man," I cut in sharply. "I will be filing a police report for fraud and identity theft." Mr. Davies's posture stiffened. "That is your right, sir. However, I must inform you that if an investigation reveals you did sign these documents and are now trying to back out, there could be severe consequences." I rose to my feet, leaning on the cane I had begun using after a minor fall. "I am ready for any consequences, because I know the truth." Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to prepare for my daughter's visit. Driving home, I puzzled over how Clara could have managed such a deception. She had to have hired an impersonator. But how did she get copies of my documents? And where did the money go? That evening, when Vincent's polished black Audi pulled into my driveway, I had my strategy. I would not cause a scene. I would not let on that I knew anything. I needed the full truth to emerge first. Clara entered carrying a cake box from a local bakery, her wide smile failing to mask her tension. Vincent followed with a bottle of wine. "Dad," Clara said, kissing my cheek. "You're looking well for your age," Vincent added with a chuckle. "Just well," Clara corrected him, shooting him a warning look. I led them to the living room, where I had set a simple dinner of roast chicken and vegetables. Clara immediately started fussing. "Daddy, why are you using these old dishes?" "You have that new set we got you for Christmas habit," I replied. "You can't teach an old dog new tricks," Vincent laughed a bit too loudly. True. But sometimes a change is for the better, isn't it, Arthur?" He had never called me by my first name before. The sudden familiarity only confirmed my suspicions. "So," I began once we were seated, "how is the house hunt going?" Clara nearly choked on her wine. "Oh, you remembered? We're still searching. The market is just so difficult." "Yes, prices are absurd," Vincent chimed in. "But we remain optimistic." "Good for you," I nodded. "You know, I was at the bank today." A silence fell. Clara froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. "The bank?" she asked. "Why?" "I received a peculiar letter about a loan I supposedly have. $500,000. Can you believe it?" Vincent let out a strained laugh. "Wow. That must be some sort of error." "That's precisely what I thought," I said. "Someone used my name, stole my identity, and passed themselves off as me at the bank." Clara set her glass down so hard that wine sloshed onto the table. "That's terrible. Did you call the police?" "I'm going tomorrow," I lied, watching them closely. "The bank is already starting an internal review. They have security camera footage. They'll bring in a handwriting expert to check the signature. The criminals won't get away." Clara's face went white, and Vincent began drumming his fingers on the table. "Dad, maybe you shouldn't worry." Clara attempted a smile. "At your age, stress is bad for your heart. Perhaps I could help you sort things out with the bank, with all that paperwork." "No need, dear," I said, patting her hand. "I am perfectly capable of handling this. Besides, I have a friend in the police department who has promised to personally oversee the case." This was another fabrication, but I wanted to see their reaction, and it was more telling than I could have hoped. "The police?" Vincent paled. "But maybe it really is a mistake. We should try to resolve it with the bank first." "No," I shook my head. "This is clearly fraud. Someone forged my signature, pretended to be me. It's a serious crime, and the people responsible must be held accountable." The rest of the dinner was agonizingly tense. Clara and Vincent exchanged nervous looks and barely touched their food. They left right after dessert, claiming they had an early morning. When the door shut behind them, I sank into my chair. There was no longer any doubt. My own daughter had stolen from me. The only question was what she had done with the money. The next day, I called my old friend Frank Miller, with whom I'd worked on numerous projects. He had become a private investigator after retiring, mostly handling infidelity and insurance cases. "Frank, I need your help," I said, explaining the situation. "Good heavens, Arthur," he grumbled. "Your own daughter. Are you certain?" "Almost positive, but I need evidence. And I need to know where that money went." "I'll look into it," Frank promised. "Give me a few days." I hung up and stared out the window. It was a lovely spring day, but my heart was heavy. How did we reach this point, where my own child would resort to theft? What did I do wrong as a father? Or was it the world that had taught her that money was more important than family? The phone rang, jolting me from my thoughts. The name of Chesapeake Financial Bank flashed on the screen. I let it ring. I wasn't ready to speak with them. My emotions were too raw. I needed all the facts before I could act. It was the way I'd always operated, methodically, thoroughly. 40 years in construction had taught me that haste could bring down the most solid structures. 3 days later, Frank called. "Arthur, I've got something. We should meet in person." We arranged to meet at a small cafe on the edge of town, a place Clara and her husband would never frequent. Frank looked much the same as he did 30 years ago, a stout man with a thick grey mustache and a sharp gaze, though now with more wrinkles and a slight stoop. He placed a thick folder on the table. "You were right, my friend. Your daughter and that husband of hers orchestrated the whole thing." Frank opened the folder, revealing photos, document copies, and printouts. First things first. The money was used to buy a house in Greenbrier, the most exclusive neighborhood in Chesapeake. $450,000. The other $50,000 probably went to furnishings and fees. He showed me a photograph of a stunning 2-story mansion with white columns and impeccable landscaping. The sale closed 4 days ago. The deed is in the name of Vincent Peaton. Not Clara, just her husband. This detail stung. Vincent had been calculating enough to secure the asset in his own name, protecting himself in case of a divorce or other issues. And Clara was so infatuated with him that she couldn't see it. How did she do it, Frank? How did she impersonate me? Frank sighed, pulling out another document. This is where it gets tricky. Clara has your power of attorney, Arthur. A general power of attorney, giving her the authority to manage nearly all of your financial affairs. What? The blood drained from my face. I never gave her any power of attorney according to this document. You signed it with a notary named Patricia Croft on December 6th of last year. I racked my brain. December 6th. That was the day Clara drove me to a doctor's appointment. My blood pressure had been high, and she insisted I see a cardiologist. On the way, she had asked to stop at a notary's office to sign some papers related to a house sale for one of her clients. She deceived me, I said slowly. I signed something, but she told me it was for her work, that she just needed a witness's signature. Frank nodded sympathetically. It's a common scam, preying on an elderly relative's trust. You're not the first, Arthur. Who else was there? There should have been another witness, Martin, Frank said. Your middle son. That news was an even heavier blow. Not just Clara, but Martin was involved. My own son. So, it's a family conspiracy, I said with a bitter smile. Who else is in on it? It seems to be just Clara, Martin, and Vincent. I couldn't find any connection to your eldest son, Simon. I took a sip of my now cold coffee, trying to steady myself. So Clara used a fraudulent power of attorney to secure a loan in my name. Martin helped her with the paperwork. The money was spent on a house for Vincent. Now they had a luxury mansion, and I was saddled with a $500,000 debt I would have to spend the rest of my life repaying, unless I could prove it was fraud. What about the notary? I asked. Did you speak to her? I tried. Frank shook his head. Miss Croft quit her job 2 months ago. Moved to California. Left no forwarding address. How convenient, I remarked. Too convenient, Frank agreed. I'll dig deeper into her background. It's possible Clara paid her off. We sat in silence for a moment. At a nearby table, a young couple laughed together. So carefree. Eleanor and I had been like that once. What's your next move, Arthur? Frank finally asked. That's a good question. I could go to the police, press charges. Clara and Martin would likely get probation. Vincent would probably walk free, claiming he was unaware of the money's origin. The house would be sold to clear the debt, but the public scandal. My children as criminals, me as the duped old man. It would be humiliating, and there was the issue of proof. The power of attorney appeared legitimate. My signature, or an excellent forgery, was on everything. The notary had vanished. The bank believed I had personally authorized the transaction. I need to talk to a lawyer, I said. Can you recommend a good one? Julian Vance, Frank replied instantly. We've worked on a few cases together. He specializes in fraud and family law. He's perfect for this. I jotted down the name and number. Frank gathered the documents back into the folder and passed it to me. Here are copies of everything I found. The originals are in my safe. Thanks, Frank. What do I owe you? He waved his hand dismissively. Forget it. Consider it payback for the time you saved my hide by catching my miscalculation on the Hampton Mall Foundation. That was 40 years ago, I smiled. I have a good memory for good deeds. He patted my shoulder. Keep me updated. And be careful with Clara and Vincent. People who can do this can become dangerous when cornered. After meeting Frank, I drove home feeling a strange mix of rage, frustration, and, oddly, relief. The uncertainty was gone. Now I knew the truth, however bitter. Back home, I laid out all the papers Frank had given me. The photos of the house were breathtaking. A grand Georgian-style mansion with a swimming pool and a 3-car garage. The very house Clara had always coveted, and she had decided to acquire it at my expense. The sales contract confirmed the closing date, with Vincent Peaton listed as the sole owner. The loan was in my name, but Clara's signature was on the trustee line. She hadn't even bothered to forge my signature there. She had simply used the power of attorney. I called Julian Vance and scheduled a meeting for the next day. Then, I did what always helped me think clearly. I took out a notebook and began to outline my options, weighing the pros and cons. Plan A, formal charges. Pros, potential justice, a chance to clear the debt. Cons, public disgrace, family ruin, difficult to prove. Plan B, private settlement. Pros, avoids publicity, saves face. Cons, Clara and Vincent might not agree, no guarantee of repayment. Plan C, this one made me pause. What if I used their own tactics against them? The power of attorney, fraudulently obtained, was still technically valid. I could. The doorbell interrupted my thoughts. It was Martin, my middle son, standing on my doorstep. He rarely showed up unannounced. Dad, he said with an awkward smile. I was in the area and thought I'd drop by. Can I come in? I stepped aside, letting him enter. Martin looked worn down. At 43, he was balding, and his dark hair was streaked with grey. A stressful job at an insurance company and a difficult divorce had aged him. How are you, Dad? He asked, taking a seat across from me. I'm fine, I said, my gaze fixed on him. And you? I'm okay, he said, avoiding my eyes. Just wanted to check on you. Clara said you had a nice dinner, so Clara had sent him to gauge my next move. Yes, it was pleasant, I said. By the way, do you remember when we last went to a notary together? I think it was back in December. Martin flinched. He was always a terrible liar. Yeah. I don't recall the exact date. December 6th, I supplied. You and Clara took me to Patricia Croft's office. Do you remember what I signed? Martin turned pale. Some documents for Clara. For one of her clients it was a power of attorney, Martin. A general power of attorney giving Clara control over my finances. The same one she used to take out a $500,000 loan in my name. He stared at me, his mouth agape. He was either a phenomenal actor or he genuinely hadn't known about the loan. Dad, I didn't know. I swear. Clara said you needed to sign it in case something happened, so she could help manage your affairs, and you believed her. Yes. Why wouldn't I? She's your daughter and you're my son, I said, and you helped her deceive me. Martin shot to his feet. No. I didn't know what she was up to. I thought it was for your own good, for my good. I repeated slowly. A $500,000 debt at 72 is for my good. Debt? He looked genuinely shocked. What debt? Clara took out a loan in my name. A loan I'll have to pay for the rest of my days, and which will likely become your burden after I'm gone. Unless you disclaim the inheritance, of course. Martin sank back into his chair. Oh God. I didn't know. I swear, Dad, perhaps he was telling the truth. Martin had always been the most impressionable of my children, easily swayed by Clara, who had manipulated him since childhood. What did she give you? I asked. Nothing, he said, looking offended. She just said it was important for your security, that you were getting forgetful. I scoffed. I can recall the specifications for every one of the 62 buildings I designed. I remember each of my grandchildren's birthdays. I even remember your 8th grade locker combination was 21 to 7 inch. Martin hung his head. I'm sorry, Dad. I should have checked. I should have made sure you understood what you were signing. Yes, you should have, I agreed. Now, tell me what you know about a house in Greenbrier. He looked up, surprised. Greenbrier? Nothing. Why? Clara and Vincent bought a house there. With the money from the loan in my name, a house. Martin looked bewildered. But they told me they couldn't even afford a decent apartment. Clearly, they've been lying to you as much as they've been lying to me. The next 3 days were a whirlwind of preparations. Julian Vance was more than a good lawyer, he was a legal strategist. He filed an emergency petition with the court, challenging the legality of the home purchase and requesting a temporary injunction that would grant me access to the house until the matter was resolved. Judge Peterson has a soft spot for seniors who are victims of fraud, Julian explained over the phone on Thursday. He signed the injunction this afternoon. We can get the keys to the house tomorrow that quickly? I asked, amazed. It's a temporary measure, Julian clarified. We haven't won the case, but we've secured use of the property until a final ruling. It gives us a significant advantage in negotiations. Friday morning, Julian arrived at my house holding a small box. Inside were 2 gleaming keys. Congratulations on the new home, he said with a grin. One condition, though. You have to actually live there, or the injunction can be voided. That won't be a problem, I said, weighing the keys in my hand. I'm already packed. The night before, I had gathered my essentials, clothes, toiletries, medicine, a few books, and a silver-framed photo of Eleanor. It all fit into one large suitcase and a bag. Not much to show for 72 years. Are you sure you're up for this? Julian asked, looking at me with concern. A confrontation could get intense. I can handle it, I nodded. I've managed construction crews for 40 years. I know how to stand my ground. Julian helped me load my things into his car, and we drove to Greenbrier. He explained the legal nuances. Technically, your son-in-law owns the house, but the loan is yours, making you financially responsible. We are challenging the loan's validity because the power of attorney was obtained through deceit. If we prove that, the loan will be nullified, and the bank will repossess the house. If we can't, we'll pursue other avenues. A criminal case for fraud or a civil suit against your daughter and son-in-law. For now, our aim is to surprise them and force them to negotiate. Greenbrier was exactly as I had pictured it. Manicured lawns, grand homes behind tall hedges, and luxury cars in every driveway. Number 14 Oakwood Drive was even more impressive than the others. A 2-story mansion with stately white columns and enormous windows, resembling a smaller version of the White House. The driveway was laid with expensive pavers, and a marble fountain stood in the yard, still dry. Impressive, Julian whistled as he parked. Your daughter has expensive tastes. She always wanted to live beyond her means, I replied, getting out of Julian's low-slung car. My cane snagged on the door, and I nearly stumbled. Careful, Julian said, steadying me. We don't want an injury before the main event. We walked to the massive front door, made of dark wood with stained glass panels. I inserted the key, and it turned smoothly. The door swung open silently. The interior was even more striking. A vast hall with a marble floor, a sweeping staircase, and a crystal chandelier hanging from the high ceiling. The furniture was all new, expensive, and impeccably chosen. leather sofas, antique-style tables, and designer lighting. They've already furnished the place, I noted, moving into the living room. With your money, Julian reminded me. We toured the ground floor, living room, dining room, kitchen, a study, and even a small home theater. Upstairs were the bedrooms. The master suite occupied nearly a third of the floor, with a massive bed, a walk-in closet, and a bathroom the size of my old kitchen. I believe this will be my room, I announced, placing my suitcase near the bed. Excellent choice, Julian grinned. The master bedroom for the true master of the house. I unpacked, placing my clothes in the empty dressers and Eleanor's photo on the nightstand. Meanwhile, Julian checked the kitchen refrigerator. They've already stocked it, he called out. Looks like they were planning a housewarming. There's enough food here to last a few days. Good, I nodded. Saves me a trip to the store. Julian checked his watch. I should go. I have a meeting in an hour. Are you certain you'll be all right here alone? Of course, I assured him. I'll just wait for my guests to arrive. After all, it is my house, isn't it? Julian smiled. Technically, yes. For now. Call me if there are any issues. And try to keep things from escalating. Our goal is negotiation, not all-out war. After Julian left, I was alone in the immense house. It was a surreal feeling, being in such opulent surroundings, knowing it was all bought with my stolen money. I walked through the rooms again, noticing details I'd missed earlier. Photos of Clara and Vincent adorned the walls, on vacation, at lavish parties, in fancy restaurants. Not a single photo of me or Eleanor. Not one memento of the family that raised her. In the study, I found a safe hidden behind a painting. A predictable choice. It was locked, of course. I found a folder in the desk with the house deeds. Rodney was right, Vincent was the sole owner. An interesting move for a married couple. Time crawled by. I settled in the living room with a book from a shelf, a popular thriller that looked like it had never been opened. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows, I heard a car pull up. It was Vincent's black Audi. The show was about to begin. I straightened my tie, I had dressed in my best suit, one reserved for weddings and funerals, smoothed my hair, and stood by the door, leaning on my cane more for effect than need. I heard keys jingle, and the door opened. Clara and Vincent entered, their arms full of bags. They didn't see me at first. I think that's enough champagne, Clara was saying. Martin promised to bring ice, and Simon. She stopped mid-sentence when she saw me. Her face froze in utter shock, a bag slipping from her grasp. A champagne bottle shattered on the marble floor. Daddy, she whispered. Hello, Clara, I smiled. Hello, Vincent. Welcome to my new home. Or is it yours? I'm getting a bit confused. Vincent recovered first, his face twisting in anger. What the hell? How did you get in? With a key, naturally, I said, holding up the keychain. Very nice locks, by the way. Where did you get a key? Clara managed to ask. Dad, what is happening? Oh, I think you know perfectly well what's happening, I said, stepping into the puddle of champagne. I received a very interesting letter from the bank. Something about $500,000 loan in my name. Quite amusing, isn't it? Considering I've never taken a loan in my life. Clara grew even paler. Dad, I can explain. I'm sure you can, I nodded. You've always been good at explanations. Like when you took my credit card at 16. Or when you sold your mother's jewelry when we were away. That's different, Clara protested. We were going to tell you everything. We were just waiting for the right moment, really. I arched an eyebrow. And when would that be? In a year? In 5 years? After I was gone. Vincent stepped forward, trying to look imposing. Look, Arthur, you have no right to be here. This is my house. I'm calling the police. Please do, I shrugged. I'd be delighted to explain to them how my dear daughter and her husband used a forged power of attorney to take out a massive loan in my name. I'm sure they'll find it fascinating. The guests started to arrive. I watched as Clara and Vincent scrambled to maintain an illusion of normalcy. They smiled, welcomed their friends, and gave tours of the house, but the tension was visible in their eyes and stiff gestures. Whenever someone asked about me, Clara recited a rehearsed line about me coming to help with the party. I neither confirmed nor denied it, letting the ambiguity hang in the air like a guillotine. Martin avoided my gaze, nursing a whiskey in a corner. His wife, Julia, who was not in on the scheme, looked utterly baffled by my presence. Soon, my eldest son, Simon, arrived with his wife, Charlotte, and their 2 teenagers. Simon was the only one who seemed genuinely happy to see me, giving me a rare, warm hug. "Dad, I didn't expect you here," he said with a smile. "You look sharp." "New suit." "Old," I replied. "I save it for special occasions." Simon was a high school history teacher, the only one of my children who had chosen a modest, honorable path. He never chased riches and was content with his life, which was perhaps why his relationship with me was always more respectful. "How have you been, Dad?" he asked, pulling me aside. "It's been too long." "I'm sorry." "I understand," I nodded. "Life gets busy." "How long have you known about Clara's new place?" he asked, looking around with unconcealed amazement. I had no idea she and Vincent could afford something like this. I could hear the genuine surprise in his voice. Simon truly knew nothing. That was a small comfort. "I'll tell you all about this house later," I said evasively, "when everyone is here." By 7, the house was packed with about 30 people. There were Clara's colleagues, Vincent's clients, new neighbors, and even a couple of local reporters invited to cover the event. Clara was growing increasingly agitated, her eyes darting towards me. Vincent tried to project confidence, but his laughter was too loud, his bragging about the house too insistent. "This is genuine cedar from Lebanon," he announced, gesturing to the study's paneling. "Cost a fortune, but Clara, and I believe you shouldn't cut corners on quality or on honesty," I interjected, appearing behind him. "Isn't that right, Vincent?" He jumped, turning with a strained smile. "Of course, Arthur. Absolutely." As everyone gathered in the living room for a toast, I knew my moment had come. Clara stood in the center of the room, ready to give a speech, with Vincent's arm possessively around her waist. "Dear friends and family," she began, her voice shaky, "Vincent and I are so thrilled to welcome you to our new home. This has been our dream for years, and it's finally a reality." If I may," I interrupted, raising my glass. "I'd like to say a few words as well." Clara froze, her face ashen. "Of course, Daddy," she forced out. I walked to the center of the room, leaning on my cane. All eyes were on me. "For those of you who don't know me," I began, "I'm Arthur Blackwood, Clara's father. And I have quite a story to tell you about this magnificent house." I paused, letting the tension build. "This house," I continued, "is special. Do you know why? Because it was purchased with money borrowed in my name, without my knowledge or consent." A profound silence fell over the room. "Daddy," Clara pleaded, "you don't know what you're saying." "You should lie down." "I know exactly what I'm saying," I retorted. "And my lawyer has all the documentation to prove it." Clara, using a fraudulent power of attorney, took out a $500,000 loan in my name. That money bought this house, which, incidentally, is registered only in Vincent's name. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A reporter discreetly started taking notes. "Arthur," Vincent seethed, "that's a lie and you know it. We paid for this house, did you?" I countered. "Then why is the loan agreement in my name? Why did the notary who witnessed the power of attorney suddenly disappear?" Gasps went through the room. Martin looked as if he might collapse. Simon stared at Clara, his face grim. "Clara," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "Is this true?" Clara's mouth opened, but no words came out. Tears welled in her eyes. "It's a lie!" Vincent shouted. "Your father has lost his mind." He's just jealous of our success. Jealous? I laughed. Of your ability to deceive? Your skill at forgery? Your talent for stealing from your own family? There has to be a misunderstanding, Charlotte, Simon's wife, interjected. There is no misunderstanding, I stated. I have proof, and a court order giving me the right to live in this house until this is resolved. That's why I'm here. Not as a guest, but as the master of the house. Dad, please, Clara's voice trembled. Let's talk about this later. Not here's when, Clara. I asked. The truth doesn't wait for a convenient time. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for spoiling the party. But I believe truth is more important than appearances. This house was bought through fraud. And I intend to live here for the rest of my days. One by one, the guests began to excuse themselves, muttering awkward goodbyes. The reporters were last to leave, their sympathetic glances towards Clara and Vincent promising damning headlines. Once only family remained, the storm broke. How could you? Clara shrieked. You've ruined us. Me. I replied. I'm not the one who committed fraud, Clara, Simon said, his voice heavy with disgust. Did you really do this? We were going to fix it, she mumbled. He would never have known. Don't be so dramatic, Vincent cut in. We just used his credit to get a better rate, and if you couldn't pay. Simon challenged. Vincent's silence was his answer. It's my fault, too, Martin confessed quietly. I helped with the power of attorney. I didn't know about the loan, but I should have. Simon looked at his brother in disbelief. You too? What has happened to our family? Clara broke down sobbing. We just wanted a better life. Then earn it, Simon said sharply. Like normal people do. What happens now? Julia, Martin's wife, asked, looking at me. Will you press charges? That's up to Clara and Vincent, I said. I've made them an offer. Sign the house over to me, assume the loan payments, and issue a public statement saying I bought the house. If they agree, we can avoid court, and if they don't? Simon asked. Then there will be a trial. A criminal trial. Would you really send your own daughter to prison? Clara asked, her face streaked with tears. Would you condemn your father to a $500,000 debt at 72? I countered. A heavy silence filled the room. Then Vincent let out a dry, humorless laugh. You know what's funny? If we had just asked him for help, he probably would have given it to us. But Clara was convinced he was too controlling, too cheap. He was right. If they had asked, I would have helped. Not with that much, but I would have helped. So now what? Martin asked. Do we just stop being a family? The question hung in the air. Could such a betrayal ever be forgiven? I suggest we all calm down and think, Simon said. We're all too emotional right now. That's sensible, I agreed. Clara, Vincent, you have until Monday to accept my offer. After that, my lawyer files the lawsuit. Where will we live? Clara asked, her voice lost. In your rental, I shrugged. Or you can stay here as my guests, provided you follow my rules. We're not living in our own house under your thumb, Vincent scoffed. My house, I corrected. Bought with a loan under my name. Grandpa, Lily, Simon's daughter, spoke up suddenly. Can I come visit you sometimes? It's so beautiful here. Everyone turned to the teenager, who was looking at me with genuine interest. Of course, my dear, I smiled. You are always welcome in my home. Awesome, she smiled back. You have the coolest house of any grandpa I know. Her simple, honest remark broke the tension. A few people managed weak smiles. I think we should go, Simon said, putting an arm around his daughter. Slowly, everyone began to leave. Martin and Julia left without a word. Simon and his family promised to call. Clara and Vincent were the last to go. Our things? Vincent asked tiredly. You can take your personal belongings, I said. Everything else stays. They returned half an hour later with 2 suitcases. Daddy, Clara said at the door. I never meant for it to be like this, neither did I, Clara, I answered honestly. But you made your choice. Now you have to live with it. They left, and I was alone in the vast, luxurious house, the silence echoing in the empty rooms. It was a victory that brought no joy, only the bitter taste of restored justice. The next morning, the first surprise was a call from Simon. Dad, have you seen the paper? He asked. Front page. Greenbrier family scandal, daughter defrauds father for mansion. The reporters had worked fast. How bad is it? I asked. It's detailed, Simon admitted. Clara and Vincent don't look good. You, however, are portrayed as a noble father wronged by his own children. An hour later, Martin was at my door, looking like he hadn't slept. Dad, he began nervously, I've come to apologize. A real apology. What we did was unforgivable. I waited. I spoke to a lawyer, he continued. I'm facing charges as an accessory. I'm willing to accept my punishment. But first, I needed to apologize to you. I was surprised by his candor. I appreciate your honesty, Martin, I said. It's a start. I'll testify against them if I have to, he added. I could see fear mixed with his remorse, but it was a step toward accountability. Lily, Simon's daughter, arrived for lunch, a vibrant 16-year-old with purple-streaked hair. Hi, Grandpa, she said cheerfully. This house is amazing. It's a shame Aunt Clara is so. Clara, I laughed. Are you staying for lunch? I asked. If you don't mind, she smiled. And maybe you can tell me about your travels? Dad said you saw the world as an engineer. We spent the afternoon talking. I shared stories of my projects, and she listened with rapt attention, sharing her own dreams of becoming an archaeologist. You know, Grandpa, she said before she left, I'm glad you live here now. It's much closer. I can visit more often. I hugged her, a warmth spreading through my chest. Perhaps something good could come from this mess after all. That evening, Julian Vance called. So, how did the big reveal go? He asked. Loud, I replied. But effective. Clara and Vincent are out. Public opinion is on my side. Martin is ready to testify. Excellent, Julian said. Clara has already been in touch. She wants to meet on Monday to discuss a settlement. Does she accept my terms? In principle, yes. But she had a question about what happens to the house after you. Gone, I chuckled. Even now, she was thinking about her inheritance. Tell her I plan on living for at least another 20 years, and my will is my own business. I will gladly tell her that, Julian said, a smile in his voice. I'll see you Monday, Arthur. 2 months had passed since that fateful evening. Life had changed dramatically. At the Monday meeting, Clara and Vincent accepted all my conditions. The house was transferred to my name, they assumed the loan payments, and a statement was published clarifying that I had bought the house. I hadn't seen or heard from them since, except for the monthly bank notices confirming their payments. I did hear about them through Simon. Vincent had lost several key clients, his reputation shattered. Clara had to find a new real estate agency. They sold their expensive car and downsized to a modest apartment. I felt no pity, only a sense of cosmic justice. They had made their choices. Martin received probation and a fine but kept his job. Our relationship began to mend. He called weekly and visited for dinner, a newfound respect in his demeanor. The most surprising change was in my own life. I, a 72-year-old widower, became a local celebrity. My new neighbors in Greenbrier were unexpectedly friendly. Beatrice Croft, a judge's widow from across the street, was the first to visit, bringing a pie and inviting me to her book club. We need a male perspective, she said with an appraising look. The club was a revelation. We debated literature with a passion I found invigorating. My engineering perspective, focusing on the construction of a novel, was a novelty they enjoyed. A fresh pair of eyes, Beatrice declared. Just what we needed. Another neighbor, a retired architecture professor named Gerald Thorne, invited me to join his chess club. Engineers are usually good strategists, he'd said. I hadn't played in decades, but I slowly regained my skill. Between the book club and chess, my days, once filled with routine, were now full of new activities. Lily became a frequent visitor, doing her homework in my study and filling the house with life. Her younger brother, Leo, a quiet teenager, started coming over too, drawn by the home theater. One evening, my house was filled with the sounds of teenagers laughing and arguing over a movie. I sat in my study and smiled. The house was finally alive. Simon and Charlotte visited more often. "You know, Dad," Simon said one evening, "I haven't seen you this happy, not even when Mom was alive." I thought about his words. I had loved Eleanor deeply, but our life was built on duty and responsibility. Now, at 72, I felt a sense of freedom I'd never known. "Perhaps you're right," I told him. Maybe I needed to go through all of this to understand what true freedom is. As one day, I received an anonymous postcard with a view of the ocean. The note was short, "I'm sorry." Not for the house, but for us. I recognized Clara's handwriting. I didn't respond. Some bridges cannot be rebuilt. I heard from Martin that Clara and Vincent's marriage was collapsing under the financial and emotional strain. They were on the brink of divorce. 3 months after the scandal, I hosted a barbecue in my backyard. I invited my new friends and the family who had stood by me. The day was warm and sunny. Lily helped me decorate. "Grandpa, this will be the best party ever," she announced. "Too bad Grandma can't see it. She would be surprised," I said, "but I think she would be pleased. The party was a wonderful success." People of all ages mingled and laughed. My old friend Frank, the private investigator, even showed up. "I had to see for myself how you were doing," he said, shaking my hand. "You know, Arthur," he said later, pulling me aside, "I thought this would end in disaster. But look at you. You found a new life." "I have," I agreed. "Though the price was high, sometimes freedom costs a great deal," he said wisely. "Especially freedom from toxic relationships." He was right. I had lost a daughter, or rather, the illusion of one. In return, I'd gained real connections, new friends, new hobbies, and my self-respect. As the sun set, Beatrice Croft asked me to dance. "Don't just stand there, Arthur," she smiled. "You're the host." I hadn't danced since Eleanor died, but my body remembered. "You are full of surprises, Ezra," she said when the music ended. "I had a good teacher," I replied, thinking of Eleanor. Later that night, after everyone had left, Simon sat with me in the yard. "Do you miss Clara?" he asked. I thought for a moment. "I miss what we never had," I answered. "A real relationship built on love and respect." "But the Clara I knew?" "No, I don't miss her. Sometimes family ties are poison," he said quietly. "And breaking them is a release." "Exactly," I agreed. Liberation. I stayed out under the stars long after he left, marveling at the strange turns of fate. A daughter's betrayal had led not to ruin, but to rebirth. The next morning, I was sipping coffee on the terrace when the mail carrier delivered a registered letter from the bank. It was a late payment notice. Clara and Vincent had missed their last installment. I sighed but felt no anger. It was predictable. I called Julian. "They've missed a payment," I reported. "What's next?" "They have 30 days before foreclosure proceedings begin," Julian said. Frankly, I expected this. According to my sources, Vincent lost his job 2 weeks ago. "What are my risks if they stop paying altogether?" I asked. "Legally, the bank could come after you," Julian admitted. "But we have the notarized agreement. We'll sue them for breach of contract. The house is yours." They can't take it without a long fight. That evening, my phone rang. It was Clara. "Daddy," she began, her voice strained. "Did you get the letter?" "I did," I said coolly. "We're having some temporary trouble," she stammered. "Clive lost his job. We just need some time." "Time is all I have left, Clara," I said. "And I refuse to waste it on your problems." "Daddy, please," she sobbed. "Don't sue us." Not now. I listened to her cries. A part of me felt a flicker of paternal instinct, but the part that remembered the years of neglect and betrayal was resolute. You have 30 days, according to the bank, I said. Use them. I hung up. It felt cruel, but I no longer trusted her promises. I had to protect myself. The next day, I met with Julian to prepare the court papers, holding off on filing them for now. But I was determined. If payment isn't made in 30 days, I said, we act. Life continued, but a shadow of legal trouble loomed. One evening, Beatrice joined me on the terrace. You seem troubled, Arthur, she said. I told her about the situation. What will you do? She asked. Protect what is mine, I replied. Even if it means severing ties with my daughter for good. Beatrice nodded. You know, Arthur, sometimes the hardest choice is between our family and our own well-being. It's not always the right choice to choose family. She told me about her own brother, an alcoholic she had tried to save for years until she realized she had to save herself. He died 2 years after I cut him off, she said sadly. Part of me will always feel guilty. But the other part knows it was the only way I could survive. I understood what she meant. Your daughter made her choice when she deceived you, Beatrice continued. Now you must make yours, and no one has the right to judge you for it. As the sun set, I realized I had already made my choice. I chose myself. I chose my peace. I chose freedom. Family bonds are precious, but when they become weapons of manipulation, breaking them is not a tragedy. It is liberation. I was free, truly free. And that freedom was worth every loss.